You need to learn to let go of what you can't do personally and professionally every day, and it's okay if that doesn't get done. Things that we thought that everyone would love as a feature, they did not care at all. Do not make your most important pitch your first pitch, because it will be your worst pitch.
Good morning, early birds and future moguls. If you ever wondered whether the successful entrepreneurs start their day a little bit different, welcome to Founders Before 9 a.m., the backstage pass to the secret ritual, mindset hacks, and tiny habits that build loud legacy. I'm your host, Candice, the founder of Miss Morning. And every episode, we will pull up the curtain with some successful entrepreneurs who turned mornings into their powerhouse. Today, I'm joined by Lauren Kennedy, the co-founder of High-End, a luxury resale platform use AI to fight counterfeit and build trust back to the community. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to today's conversation because I know you girls are literally disrupting the whole industry, and also you gave birth fairly recently. Congrats of being a new mom.
Thank you. Yeah, 3 weeks ago, so it was very recent, but I'm feeling good so far, so it's good.
Yeah, how does that feel?
A bit surreal, to be honest with you, because you're sort of trying to raise a baby at the same time as building a very young business. So it's trying to find like the right balance. But you know what? If anyone can do it, I can do it.
Yeah, I know. I feel like being a startup founder and also at the same time being a new mom, you literally combine the toughest task and then you're trying to navigate yourself. So I'm particularly curious, like after being a mom, and what your morning looks like right now.
My morning is definitely very different now to what it was 4 weeks ago. But we try and maintain some sort of routine. The biggest thing I try not to do in the mornings is not to look at my phone for the first 30 minutes. Because I used to always look at my phone. So I know when I wake up, I will have emails, I'll have Slack messages, I'll have things to respond to. But I can wait 30 minutes and sort of get clarity, make my bed, do things that make you feel good in the morning, and then you can get to it. The company won't burn down in 30 minutes, hopefully, anyway.
So walk us through like the exact routine that you have at the moment, and include like feeding baby maybe.
Yeah, of course. Well, my morning sort of starts at night, I would have to say, with both the baby and work. So what I always do the night before is write down a list of tasks that I have to do the next day, and I prioritize it. So now more so than ever, I don't have as much time as I used to have, especially with a newborn. So what I need to do is to make sure if I've just ticked one thing off my list, then at least I'm happy. You're moving forward, my team's okay, and there's no sort of fires burning at High-End. So the night before, I will always write down a list of what I need to get done. I'll prioritize it. I'll time block it to figure out how long that's going to take. Yeah. So when I wake up in the morning, I don't feel stressed. My cortisol levels aren't super high because I know what I have to do for the day from a work side. And then from a personal side, usually my baby, he wakes up at the moment at about 5 a.m., which isn't too bad. I'm getting like 4-hour block sleeps right now, so hopefully that stays the same. So my day probably starts at about 5 a.m. I'll feed him, change him, get him ready, and then he'll go back to sleep for another few hours. So I'll spend probably 30 minutes after he goes back to bed, maybe at 6 a.m., just getting up, making the bed, organising everything, reviewing everything from work, and then I'll jump onto my laptop, have breakfast for about 30 minutes, an hour. And for me, it's really important at the moment that my space is clean so I can have mentally a clean mind, because it is a lot harder when you don't have much time and you have a baby that's unpredictable, that might sleep, might not sleep, and you kind of have to be willing to do anything at any point. So for me, one real big non-negotiable is, well, two. The first one is having my list of priorities for work, but then also having my environment clean at home, so I feel sane somewhat.
I feel like you've adopted so well, and it's really good to hear that even though your life changed a bit, but you can still find small anchors to keep yourself on track. So, and also at the same time, it's a good reminder to everyone that morning routine doesn't has to be rigid, like hours long checking list from maybe meditation, journaling, a lot of things we've been talking so much about, but you can still craving out some times or some like tiny habits for yourself, or even some like necessary task you have to do, but you enjoy that moment like a piece rather than a chores. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of founders who are also a parent will appreciate of hearing that, because you just find a way to really work for yourself.
Absolutely. And to be transparent, that was something I was worried about, like becoming a first-time mom. I was like, how am I going to do it all? How am I going to make sure the business is still running, but I'm also doing a good job at raising a baby, essentially, at the end of the day? And I spoke to another founder at a Blackbird dinner who has had a baby semi-recently, and I just said, how did you navigate it all, especially with an early stage startup? It's not like we've got a massive team where you can just lean on someone else or put someone else in to run the company. You have to be there every single day doing everything. Like, I'm always up at, if I have to feed at 2 a.m, I'm probably on my emails and Slack at 2 a.m. as well. So my team will hear from me at 2 a.m, probably more than 9 a.m. But it was really nice hearing from her experience about what worked, what didn't work. And she's one that actually gave me the advice about certain priorities of your list, because you need to learn to let go of what you can't do personally and professionally every day. And it's okay if that doesn't get done. But having one thing that you know you get done, whether it's having a clean space at home or getting that one top priority thing on your list for work done, you still feel like you've achieved something and you're not sort of going a bit mentally insane where you feel like you're going backwards, I would say.
What you did pretty well is like you create that space only for the work, and like intentionally separating two space for yourself, and it's also good modeling for your kids.
Absolutely. I think I got a lot of questions before I gave birth. They're like, how are you going to manage them both? Are you going to want to maybe step away from the business because you want to raise a baby? But to be honest, that thought has never entered my mind, because I quite literally love what we're building at High End, and I very much believe in what we're building. And it's also a bit of a transformative moment for High End, because we're launching our new B2B AI product in 4 weeks' time, or just under 4 weeks' time.
That's exciting.
So I was like, there's no maternity leave, you can't really have time off, but I don't feel like I'm stepping away from either of those two roles. Like, it has to work together because you love them both. And I think it has to work in synergy as well. Like, one thing that I really had to step back and think about is all the meetings that we have with our team members, are they urgent? Do they need to happen at that time, or can someone else run it and then essentially give me like a voice memo update on it? So some meetings that are mission critical for me to attend, I will attend, but others I will step back from, and it's so fine for someone else to take, and it does not hinder the business in any way. It does not hinder me personally or the team personally or anything like that. So it's learning how to navigate the two to work together.
I love that. And I also feel like if you delegate some certain tasks to other people, it also empowers them to growing with the business, right?
Absolutely. We have the best team, and I'm very, very grateful for the team. And something that I was focused on doing when I first found out I was pregnant in Melbourne last year, before we moved to Sydney in December, was that we had to have the right team in place who were self-sufficient. They can work autonomously. They feel empowered to do their job and do it well, like they're achieving something at the end of the day. And I can confidently say we have like an amazing team. I'm incredibly lucky to have the people that we do have at High End. And I also feel very, very supported even through this now phase into motherhood, where I've never felt pressure from the team. I'll have a call at random times, or we'll just do voice notes if that's what suits, and they've been fine. So I'm very, very lucky to have a great team.
Yeah, that's so amazing. Yeah. So let's talk about your personal journey before you ended up in High End. And I heard some interesting story that happened in Silicon Valley, which is like you kind of like your turning point. So tell us about like how you start from a fashion designer, right? And then pivot in a between and then ended up here.
Bit of a change. So when I was at school, all I wanted to do was study fashion. Loved fashion, loved design, loved art. I studied a fashion degree, won an internship, got a job as a junior designer straight away when I left, worked there for about a year, but it didn't quite feel fulfilled from a creative perspective. So I did probably what every 21-year-old does and went to Europe for 6 months, quit my job, went traveling for a bit. And I ended up in San Francisco, and I accidentally stayed at a place called a startup house. I had no idea what a startup house was at that point. And this was like maybe 15 years ago, or not quite 15, but back when Apple was very new. It was like the first or second iteration of the iPhone. They didn't really have too many other products.
When was that, by the way?
When was it? I think it was 2013.
Okay.
I think it was 2013. I think that was the year. Or maybe 2012. It was a while ago.
Yeah.
And I had nowhere to stay in San Fran, and I called one of my friends who was living in Sydney because her sister lived in San Fran. And she was like, there's this Australian guy and New Zealand guy that are running this accommodation space. You need to go, you can go stay there. I just thought it was a hostel or something. I didn't know what a startup house was at that point. It was all very new. And then I got there, and everyone who was staying at this place was a founder, and they had come to San Francisco, Silicon Valley, to pitch their ideas to investors, to meet other founders, and they were all building something really cool.
Wow.
And this was in the early stages of the App Store. So a lot of them had very juvenile apps that they were releasing and charging $1 or $2 for an app on the App Store on the iPhone. And that completely changed my perspective on everything, completely. The people that I met, they probably weren't the type of people that I would have known in Australia. So the conversations we had, where we went to hang out, what we did, it just completely changed my perspective of what I wanted to do. And when I was in that startup house, that's when I applied to do a physics degree at Sydney Uni. So I'd always been interested in like maths, astrophysics, that sort of area, but just thought it was too different. I didn't know what I would even do with that as a career. And then I was speaking to this French guy who was staying at the startup house, and he had his own company, and he's like, yeah, why not just do it? And I was like, you know what, that's true, why not, what have you got to lose? So I applied, and then I found out I got in. So then I came back to Australia, cut the trip short, and then studied physics, and that's where I learnt how to code and do a lot more math and deep dive into the fraud space and things like that. And from there I ended up in tech consulting, and then at Macquarie Bank leading the fraud data science space in the wealth analytics team.
For you, it's like, I really love the journey. It's like you are collecting different like puzzle pieces and then ended up using all of them to solve one big problem. And it's also a good highlight that most of the time the founder's journey aren't linear. You have to explore a bit before you finally find your thing. But I'm wondering, are you always have this entrepreneurial spirit in your mind, or it's just like happened?
No, I think it definitely was always there. It's kind of like an itch that you actually need to scratch.
Yeah.
I think if you want to be a founder and you want to try it, you have to at some point, because it will never go away. I was never the type of person who wanted to stay in corporate and climb the ladder. Now, I think the time that I left Macquarie to start High End was the right time for me in my personal development, professional development. I don't think I could have done it earlier, because what I learned, especially at Macquarie in the fraud space, was so pivotal to what we're doing now at High End with counterfeit detection and authentication detection. So I feel like I needed to go through that process to be able to learn the skills that I have now to build what we're building at High End and apply it to High End. I think I always knew I wanted to merge fashion and technology together somehow. I just had no idea where it was, because at that time AI wasn't around, ChatGPT wasn't around. We're building machine learning models, but there hadn't really been that leap yet of all of your LLMs and things like that for your large language models. It was during COVID when I was at Macquarie. I think it was in 2020. So I'd always sort of done little bits and pieces, businesses on the side, but never really tried to create a fully fledged business or create a startup. But I was at home and quite bored, as a lot of people were during COVID. And I had this idea of building these models around fraud detection in the secondhand space, because in COVID, the secondhand market doubled. Everyone was at home. Everyone was going through their wardrobe. They were shopping online. They were selling online. And that's when fraud in the secondhand market really started to ramp up. I mean, you always had it in fake Chanel's or Hermes, things like that, but you didn't really have it from your social media and your TikTok, like your Zimmerman dresses or your mid-market pieces. All of a sudden, someone will post something on TikTok, it would go viral, and then someone else would be making a dupe of it the next day, and you could buy it straight away. And there were a lot of scams on Facebook Marketplace, Depop, all these platforms. And I started to look into it, and I was like, surely there's a solution as a consumer where I can just upload these images somewhere and it can tell me if it's real or not. But nothing existed, because it was a very new sort of problem, a novel problem. So I applied to join the StartMate like founder series, where it was like a mentor session for a week, where they allocate you different mentors who were exited founders or were just C execs in the industry, and you can essentially pitch them idea, they give you feedback, things like that. So I got into that when I was in COVID, and I met some incredible people during that period. One of the females that I ended up pitching to was now one of our investors. It sort of came full circle a couple years later. And then from there, that sort of just like ignited the fire. And I was like, okay, I know I need to learn more about this. I need to build something. You need to sort of get to market some way. And that's where it sort of just
happened.
Never stopped.
Yeah. Wow. So let's talk about high end. Even though at the beginning I did some like short introduction, but do you want to officially introduce what high end is?
Absolutely. So high end started as a Facebook group about 10 years ago or 11 years ago now.
Yeah.
And this is back where there was nowhere to buy or sell your secondhand goods. You could go to the charity shops, but that was essentially the only channel. And it started as a secret group. You could only get in if someone had invited you. So it was very much like an if you know
so you
sort of
can't
situation.
search by yourself.
No, you couldn't search for it. So we could have a conversation. I'll say, oh, I sold, my Prada loafers in the high-end group. And you'll say, what's high-end? You couldn't search for it and add yourself. I would have to add you. And then in about 2020, we made the group public so anyone could search for it, and that's when it sort of skyrocketed in the growth, and we ended up having almost 100,000 people in the group. We're like, there's clearly something here in market, we need to do something with it. We ran a lot of interview series, a lot of questionnaires, things like that, surveys to actually validate that there was still a gap in the market for a secondhand platform and that authentication and counterfeits was a really big issue. And then we built our pitch deck from there, and then we raised capital, and we've now got our own dedicated secondhand app.
Wow.
And we're launching our B2B and B2C AI technology where you can authenticate anything on the go digitally.
That's so
with
cool.
just your iPhone.
But I found high end, like the journey of high end in itself is really different. It's not have like the other typical tech startups with a pitching deck from day one.
Yeah.
It's actually started from the small group, Facebook group, and also created by your co-founder Brooke back in 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was wondering at the very beginning, because you were mentioned like during the pandemic and like resale market is kind of booming in general, but what was the trigger that made you two decided, okay, you can co-found it together and make this become something big?
I think it was that StartMate program that I went through. So Brooke and I knew of each other and were familiar maybe for a few years prior to that, but we weren't in business together and there was no sort of business aspect of high-end running. And then after I went through that program, one of the critical points that one of our mentors brought up was that you need data to build these AI models, and you need the knowledge. So you need to prove the concept. If you were to build that from scratch today, you would need to buy so many products, and you would also need the knowledge to be able to label the data to say what is authentic and what is counterfeit, or get brand partnerships for that space. And then being the Facebook group, there were upwards of 20,000 images being posted every single month. Every single item was being reviewed before it went live. So we were able to label the data to say it was authentic or it was counterfeit. So the richness in data set and community that came from that Facebook group was really one of the biggest triggers. So I gave her a call and essentially I pitched my idea to Brooke. I was like, this is what I want to do. We need to build this business. We're going to build these models. We're going to build like our own marketplace, blah, blah, blah. And then we just started chatting, and I think we went back and forth for quite a few months, really making sure that the problem was real. And then I started developing some sort of code to understand, can we actually build these models that we want to build? And then maybe after 3 months, that's when we finally came together. We're like, yes, let's set this company up. Let's do something about it, create the surveys in the group to further validate what we're doing, and then build the pitch deck to go from there and pitch for capital.
Right. And then you built a dedicated platform, an app and site for high end. So none of you guys have developed app before, right?
No.
So how did you even start to design that app and make sure every function is just right and never lose the soul of the community?
It was definitely tricky, and it's a very good question, never losing the soul of the community. Because one thing that we went through back in the day, I remember there were two guys from Blackbird, a VC here. This is before we even sort of started pitching. We didn't even have a pitch deck. We didn't know what a pitch deck was, and they were so patient with us. We had maybe 5 or 6 meetings virtually during COVID where they took us through what you have in the pitch deck, what you have in your data room, all these different aspects. And one of the questions that I'll never forget that they asked me, they were like, but what is the magic of your community that you can transfer over to the app? How do you not lose that magic? Because that's the reason why it's such a fantastic space in high end. It's trusted, it's been around for a long time, and people have made friends through the group. Like Brooke and I met through the Facebook group, so there's a lot of connections there. It was difficult when we first started the app. I think both our individual skill sets was what made it quite strong to go to market with. So my background being in tech, I've worked with developers before, so I sort of can speak their language and know what we need to look for, how we to prioritize it, how long things take or cost, things like that. And Brooke's side is more the creative side, so the copy, knowing the visual elements, things like that. The biggest thing that helped us though when we're in development is speaking to the group. So speaking to the customers, like things that we thought that everyone would love as a feature, they did not care at all.
Okay.
We had our list, we prioritized it. We're like, everyone's going to love this. It's going to be amazing. And then we would ask people directly and have like a survey or to speak to the people that are really, really engaged in the community. And they would say, oh, no, I don't really care about that. I want you to build this instead. And we're like, okay. So that really helped when we first launched to make sure that what we're launching with was something that they would use at the end of the day, especially because you're moving from a free platform to a paid platform.
Yeah.
So there is sort of a hurdle and a barrier to entry. So you need to make sure what you're building has enough to offer in a value proposition to the customer that they prefer it to Facebook.
And I love your approach. I think it's a really master class of building community, because even though you have a really cool technology and also you think about all the cool features, but at the end of the day, if the user, they don't like it, they wouldn't use it. And especially when you move to a faceless app, then people would resist to change because they are kind of get used to the previous shopping or selling experience. But all you need to do is one of them to transit to the new platform. So you need to make sure it works for human.
You're also competing against yourself when you think about it, because we still have a Facebook group today. There's 110,000 people in there. It's no longer buy and sell. It's more of a community where you ask questions, share things, and the buy and sell is purely on the dedicated app. But when we first launched, you could still buy and sell for a couple of months on the Facebook group. So we really needed to make sure that we were proving to our community that it's better on the app. Because Facebook being a huge platform, Meta, they can build any sort of technology, any tools they want essentially in there. We couldn't afford to build the same platform. So we needed to have magic in another way. And part of our magic in the community was making sure everything was authentic and it was trusted. Because that's something that you don't have on Facebook, because we couldn't manage the financial process on Facebook. We couldn't mitigate any risk if I sold something to you but then never sent it to you or anything like that. That happened quite a few times in the Facebook group, but we weren't able to do anything about it. So making sure that all the pain points we saw in the Facebook group were accommodated for on the app and the customers and community was protected was really crucial when we first launched.
That's right. So for the first like couple of users or early users, what did you do specially to get them on board and let them try to use the app, download it?
Something that we were quite big on before we even launched was we don't want to be a faceless brand. So Brooke and I always want to continue speaking to the community. We don't want to be someone that you can't sort of access or you don't speak to at all. We love the high-end group. It's been a community for so long. Like that's something that is so special that not a lot of other brands do have. So before we even launched, we took them on the journey with us. So like I was saying, we would run surveys or would ask them questions. Even when we were building our branding, whether it was our colors or the font type, we would ask them these questions. We're like, what do you like? Do you like A or do you like B or do you like C or none? And what do you care about? So they really felt like that they had a say in what we were building, because they're in the group for so long. We wanted to make sure whatever we were building was built directly for them. So all of our messaging, all of our communication and our activities was quite literally getting them to build it for us in a way and saying, what do you want? Okay, we'll build it for you. We also ran quite a few community activations. So whether it was at Fashion Week last year, or if it was at a coffee store at Harry's in Bondi, we wanted to make sure we're always giving back to the community and making sure there was a physical presence as well as a digital presence of the community to make sure that they felt like when they were coming across that they had a personal investment in a way into the brand and it wasn't just like another kind of app. And we ran a lot of different competitions. We partnered with a lot of brands. So again, it was all about value to the community, really. So when we first launched, it was like, do they feel like they value the platform? Do they feel like they value the brand tie-in? Do they feel like they value the founders and that they're getting something out of it at the end of the day? And it's not something for us, because it's not. You should never build a product for yourself, because it would never work. It was a product that was quite literally built for our customers at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that. And I really wanted to ask, from the user's perspective, how did they find from the beginning and until today? How do they feel like how app use for them? Is that easy to use? What's their feedback?
We got a lot of feedback when we launched, and it was good and bad. The great thing is when you've got 100,000 people, you will have people that respond to you and will tell you what's great and what they don't like. The biggest positive point of feedback was that they feel safe and secure. They're like, it's easy, I love it. The biggest negative I would say is that we don't have chat on the platform, but it's coming in 3 weeks' time. We're relaunching the marketplace with a lot of different features, which is good. So there's sort of an element that they had on Facebook that we don't have on the app today that allows people to sort of engage more with that social aspect, because Facebook is a social media platform. So they were able to look at people's profiles, they were able to comment on posts, things like that. You can't do that today on the high-end app, but you will be able to very soon. We had quite a few people when we first launched that reached out and literally built like decks for us. They were like, I love this about the app. I'm a product designer or a product manager. You should add this or you should change this. So even though some of the feedback, it could have been perceived as negative, it was actually positive because they were trying to help us make a better product. It wasn't like someone was communicating with us and saying that it's absolutely terrible and they hate it, they'll never use it again, even if it was all constructive feedback essentially. Today, I think it's a lot better because we've got a 40% repeat buy rate, and I think that is evident from the group that we've built for 10 years. So when people are purchasing, they're coming back. So they feel safe on the app, they like it, they really enjoy the product that's on offer there, and we've got a really sticky sort of user base. But I think the next step or iteration of the app is adding in more of that sense of community from a digital sense. I think we've done quite well on a physical sense because we always do physical meetups with our community, but from a digital sense, I think there needs to be a little bit more interaction between buyer and seller, and that was part of the magic that we had on the Facebook group.
Yeah, I really love your approach. Like, you did a lot of like small things, but making the user feel they have been heard and they have been cared, and that's really important. And especially no matter like for any founder out there, no matter how cool your technology can be, but if you forget human side, you will stumble. So that's so important. So we will touch a lot of times on AI authentication system. So can you explain that a bit in a simple term? So what kind of like the data or the pattern it's looking at to decide if it's a real or fake?
Definitely. So there's a scale in the counterfeit area. So you have really bad counterfeit, which we call sort of like stupid fraud, where you might have a spelling mistake of a brand or something like that. And then you have at the upper echelon, you've got your super fakes, which are more on your high-end designer goods, like your Chanel, your Hermes, maybe your Miu Miu's, your Pradas, that sort of area. And some of those are very hard to detect, especially in the handbag space, because as a fraudster, it's actually a lucrative business. So a lot of people are like, you can buy a fake or a counterfeit Hermes for $5,000, and people knowingly will spend that because to the naked eye, it probably looks quite real, and the quality might be good, like it might still be made out of leather.
I really feel that because I'm from China, and there are so many counterfeits. Looks so real, you even can't tell. It's not only happen in second shopping market, it's actually happen in first hand market as well.
Yes, retail. Okay, one of my friends, going off topic here a little bit, but one of my friends bought something from Net-a-Porter in New York a couple of years ago.
Net-a-Porter?
Yeah.
No way.
And she bought it was a totem jacket, so it was a few $1,000s. It wasn't cheap, and she got it and she did a TikTok on it, and it went completely viral. And it turns out someone else had purchased this jacket but returned a counterfeit, and she had just purchased it on the retail store.
Oh my God.
And they had sent her the counterfeit, and she was like, something doesn't look real, blah blah blah. They ended up refunding her, so it was fine. But even in your retail space, and it's happened on Essence a few times as well, if you're working at these places like Essence or Net-a-Porter, you're not trained to look if something's real or not. You look if there's a receipt, if the tags are still on, if it looks okay, no damage, and then you process it essentially. So the solution that we're building is not only for customers, it's not only for your secondhand markets, but it's also for retailers with fraudulent returns, because they don't know what to look for. I used to work at David Jones when I was in uni, and I definitely didn't look to see if it was a counterfeit or if it was an authentic product. You sort of just scan the receipt and that's it. But in terms of how you determine if it's authentic or not, again, it's very different for every brand and the scale is different, but how we've sort of built our models, there's different steps to it. So your first step, as I was saying before, is your stupid fraud, just to make sure that the fabric content's right, the spelling's correct, it's got everything on the tags that it's meant to have when you compare it to the real ones. When it comes to your leather goods, like your handbags or your shoes, or even some of your jewelry, you'll look at the stampings and the markings. So you might look at the stitching to make sure it's consistent. You might look at the logo to see that the spacing and the character recognition is consistent with the branding itself. And then you'd also look at like the quality of the hardware. So some of the chains in the handbags, you might, if you're looking at it in person, you might like clink the chain together to hear what the sound is, so you know the density of the metal, things like that. Visually, when you're looking at it, you would look at like the shine of the metal, you would look at the shape of the metal, things like that, to determine if it's like a high quality or sort of a low quality. But it's very different whether it's clothing or it's handbag. When it comes to clothing, you primarily look at the care labels, and you'll also look at the brand labels. You look at stitching. If it's a print, like Alame, very popular Australian brand, they IP all their prints, or most of them, with artists. That can also be replicated, like someone digitally might replicate those prints. So we'll look to see if there's any sort of anomaly detection between the two prints. So what's really important when we were building these models is to make sure you've got a great data set, not only on the authentic side, but also on the counterfeit side, because you need to show the model what a good counterfeit looks like and what a bad counterfeit looks like. Because otherwise, if I come in with a super fake, then it's not going to be able to detect what it is and what it isn't, essentially, at the end of the day. So having the right data set and labeled correctly was the biggest piece of the puzzle in building this, because you need to have all your different scenarios, because there's so many edge cases to it where, you know, even when you have physical authentication experts, like if we're authenticators, I might look at it and say, no, I think that's counterfeit. But you might look at it and say, no, I think it's authentic. But it's all very opinion based, and it's only based on what your experience individually has been and what you've seen before. So that's, again, why it's really important to embed this technology into platforms, because you're not restricting it to one person's knowledge or one company's knowledge. Essentially, you're giving access to all products that are being produced on the counterfeit and the authentic side to determine if it looks more like a counterfeit or if it looks more like an authentic product.
That makes so much sense. And how reliable the AI is, because from a customer perspective, I would doubt, like, does AI can really spot a fake from like better than a real person to physically check everything?
Definitely, and that's something that we've been really conscious of. When you release something to market, you need to make sure you're thinking of all the different situations, because trust in the secondhand industry is the biggest thing that you need to retain. So if I were to, or you were to buy something from high end and it was counterfeit, but we'd said it was authentic, same with if you're shopping on eBay or Depop, Facebook Marketplace, the real, then you distrust that platform and you may never purchase from there again. So it's really, really important that you're getting it right the first time, or if it is wrong, that you've got the process in place where that customer still feels supported to shop and sell with you at the end of the day. So at the moment, our models, depending on the brand, you're sitting at a 96, 97 or 98% accuracy, which is higher than what we expected to go to market. Ideally, at the end of the day, we'll have over 99% accuracy, and that occurs once you release it to market and you get more data and you can build up from there. But we're really happy with what we're launching to market with. So essentially what that means, if you've got something that's at 98% accuracy, 2% of the products you might incorrectly determine as authentic or counterfeit. So maybe we authenticate 100 products and 2 of them might be wrong, but 98 of them you're getting correct at that stage. And it's not possible in the data world to get 100% just by numbers. You're not able to do that. So there's always going to be an error margin, but having it already at 98% margin 98% accuracy before launch is something that we're really, really happy with how we built the model. And the goal is to get that plus 99% mark.
I see. So from the for user, if they wanted to like buy or sell, they need to send upload the digital pictures of the bags or whatever they want to sell, and then how does AI gonna tell them if it's a real or fake?
There's 2 solutions at the moment. So today, if I'm shopping, whether it be at a charity store or the markets or even on Facebook Marketplace, if I need to determine if something's authentic, I can't really, because I don't have the product in my hand.
Okay.
Like maybe you can send the images to an online platform, or you call someone who's an authenticator and say, hey, can you authenticate this for me? There is nothing that is readily available for the consumers. And on the business side, there's no tool where they can plug and play and automate that process from a digital perspective. So today, everything is physically authenticated. So I would have to send my Zimmerman dress to you. You would look at it and say, I think it's real, or I don't think it's real. So what we're changing in the industry is we're automating that process so it's all done digitally. So you don't physically need that product. We've already tested it in our own marketplace, and that's the beauty of having your own marketplace. You can trial and error, prove the concept, and that's where we really learned where the model was failing and where it was succeeding, to fine-tune it before we're ready to launch to market for businesses and consumers to use. So today, it's all automated in the high-end marketplace, which is amazing. There's been a big learning curve there, but also great data acquisition process. So as a seller, I upload it to high-end, just normally, there's no change to me, and then I will get a response from the model saying it's either deemed authentic or it's deemed counterfeit. I mean, there are grey areas where perhaps they just don't upload enough images, or they've taken only images from online. It's not user-generated content, and you can't determine its authenticity in those instances. But you essentially get an email back saying, hey, we need these images again to just determine if it's correct or if it's not correct. So we'll educate you so you know what you need to take the image of, so it's not confusing for the customer, because that's where AI can be a little bit challenging, and technology in general is that the response can be confusing, and it's like, okay, that's too hard. I'm just not going to upload this dress for sale, or whatever it might be from the seller perspective. So we made sure that it really does feel like there's a human element to it at the end of the day. And from the buyer side, what's going to change is this is going to be available in the higher marketplace for a consumer to use. So you don't have to be selling the product. You could be buying it on another platform, or you could even just have it at home. Maybe someone has inherited a product and you're just not sure. You can use this technology without listing it for sale. You will upload the photos that we guide you on, and we'll send you a response. If it's authentic, you'll get a certificate as well. So if you do want to sell it on other platforms, hopefully you sell it on high end, but I know everyone sells elsewhere. I also do it. You can upload this on other platforms to help prove to the buyer at the end of the day that it is authentic. So that's something that is not available today, where consumers can't go anywhere to digitally authenticate a product, and that will be available in the marketplace when we relaunch it in 4 weeks time. And it's completely free. Exciting. So no barrier to entry, anyone can use it. We're not charging for it, and it's also going to be available in Shopify for businesses. So a lot of the e-com platforms are built on Shopify, which is fantastic. So they can plug and play. Essentially, they just pay a subscription, and then all the products digitally go through our model, and we'll return them a result saying if it's authentic or if it's deemed counterfeit, or if we need more images at the end of the day. So the goal was to make it as seamless as possible for both the customer and the business, and also feel like that there's a human element behind it, and it's not confusing from a technical perspective.
It sounds like speeds like everything up, and also work for like brand. How many brand it can like authenticate?
So at the moment we're launching with 3 brands. We're targeting mid-market, so your Australian brands, because that's the biggest issue here in Australia. So your middle market brands like your Alame, your Zimmerman, Age, Camilla Mark, all of those sort of brands, they don't have the technology to combat counterfeits, and it's also brand damaging. And you have a lot of platforms now that are selling dupes or are selling counterfeits in this space, because the Australian brands, when they go global, they love them overseas. If you go to the UK, you go to Dubai, you go to the US, they love those brands with the prints. But even now with the rise of, so what's happened in the US with all the tariffs, and there's a lot of the Chinese suppliers that are now taking to TikTok and saying, I'm actually the supplier for Lululemon or for Chanel. And so people are now going direct to the factories instead of going to the brand at the end of the day, which again is why this technology is so useful, because a lot of people are buying from these factories because they're like, hey, if I can get it at a fraction of price, why wouldn't I actually do that? And something that we're actually doing is we're also going to buy from them to determine the quality of these counterfeits, if they are counterfeits, because a lot of them might not even be the right actual factory. So you're going to have a lot of consumers that need this technology to see what they've purchased, if it's real or if it's not real at the end of the day, which is amazing. So we're very, very excited for that.
Yeah, that's so amazing. And I also wanted to touch on your investment journey, because I feel like woman-led tech startup is so rare globally. It's probably around 50%, and don't need to mention about like the startup can get investment maybe just around 2 to 3%.
Yeah, it's globally. It's very low.
Yeah, it's very low. So share with us a bit of your journey. How did you get the investment?
I think there's 2 sides to it, one being the tech side and one just being a female-led company anyway. You have a lot of investment firms that do want to invest in the female businesses. I think your pool to begin with, there are less female founders to select from, but I think that comes from what you see in the industry, where you don't get funding and you don't see a lot of successful female founders. A lot of them are male founders. So it's trying to encourage the pool size to actually increase to begin with is probably one of the biggest issues. We spent a lot of time validating the problem and making sure that it was correct, because as a female founder, I think you do actually need to probably overprove your concept a little bit more perhaps to male founders, and that's probably an unconscious bias that investors might have. But something that was also pivotal to us through this StartMate program that I went through, and one of the mentors that I was assigned, who is now our investor, she introduced me to someone before Brooke and I even went on this journey with High End, just as sort of like a mentor or an advisor, and I would get coffee with him once a month and catch up and just discuss the model ideas that I wanted to build. And he'd seen a lot of success in businesses and grown businesses before, not at the startup level, but at the larger level. So he really challenged me to think about, okay, if we're going for capital, what does success look like? What are your KPIs? What's your measurement? How do you validate your financial models? Like really poking holes in everything. So having someone who can validate what we're building, or poke holes really in what you're building from a pitch deck perspective before you even go for investment, is the best first step you can do, because that means that you are showing up as your best possible chance when you do eventually pitch to these investors. And then the biggest thing that's a help on that journey is just connecting with everyone. You are only as good as whoever sort of believes in you at the end of the day from that financial perspective. And I mean, I don't know a lot of billionaires or anything like that, so it's not like you can knock on their doors and say, hey, I want investment or I need investment for my startup. You can't actually get that connection. So making sure that you're well connected in the industry, whether it's with family offices or angel investors, exited co-founders, so you can learn from them, but then they can also either invest in you at the end of the day, or they can connect you with people who can invest in you, because it's all about trust at that early stage. When you are going for your first capital raise, they're really investing in you as a founder over the business, because what your business starts off with is not what it's most likely going to end up as. So they need to trust that you can make the right decisions at the end of the day, and you'll pivot where you need to pivot. So that's really what you're trying to get at the end of the day, is the trust rather than just the investment from these people. They need to believe in you as a founder. So we connected with quite a few people just through networking, through VCs, or programs like the StartMate program, and also Gary, who's now our chairman, who was introduced to me by one of our investors. He has a great network as well, but at the end of the day, you still need to be able to execute in that investor meeting, even if you have the connection. Because I mean, I've been introduced to 1 million people and they've said no. Like, a lot of people say no. You have to, pitch 1,000 times till you get that one yes, and you get someone to believe in you. And then you're like, okay, I can do this. And it's sort of like a domino effect, and you go from there. But you'll always get 1 million no's. I'd say the biggest thing is networking with the right people, and also just sharing your idea. Because at the beginning, I was a little bit nervous to share what we're building, because it's like, oh, but what if everyone else can build it, blah, blah, blah. To be honest with you, there's enough talent and money in the world that anyone could build what you're building. Like, you're not really that special at the end of the day. So if Apple wanted to build this, they could build it. But all those big companies, they probably make the decision if they build or if they acquire at the end of the day. And a lot of them acquire because they don't want to spend the time building. So that was probably the biggest hurdle, is networking in the right way, but also having the right conversations with that network, making sure you're very transparent about what you're building, transparent about the challenges, asking for advice to say, okay, let's pretend to pitch. Tell me what you think. Would you invest in me, even if you're not an investor? What we did before we went for our first pitches was we pitched to our friends and our family, people that knew about what we're building, people that had no idea what we're building, just so we could understand the type of questions that we could get asked, because you need to know the answer to it. Or if you don't at the time, it's fine to get back to them, but you've got one opportunity to make that right impression. And I would also say, do not make your most important pitch your first pitch, because it will be your worst pitch. You'll be terrible at your first one because you're not used to it. You need to practice, exactly, especially with the first capital raise, because you have no idea what you're doing. You barely know what a data room is and how to build all the financial models. So making sure that you're sort of warming your way up to the really important investor pitches was really good for us. Like, we spent months, I think, making sure we had the right pitch, we knew what questions we might get asked, and we also had the right people we were pitching to, because there's no point in pitching to someone who doesn't invest in that type of business. It's a waste of their time, possibly a waste of your time at the end of the day. So you've got to have all those steps correct.
Right. Yeah, I think through your answer, the biggest takeaway from me is like, you really understand what you're doing, what you're trying to build. You have that vision first, and then build the right network, as you said. And then at the end of the day, when you really have that big moment, then you can get them, you can let them understand your vision and what you're gonna build. So yeah, that's so good. So to wrap up this conversation today, I wanted to ask, do you have any tips or like insight to share with any female founders who are maybe stuck in some challenges or difficulties in their founders journey?
It's always a tough question, but the best advice I could give is probably just network, honestly. Speak to everyone and anyone, whether it's a founder at the start of their journey, someone who's a little bit ahead of you, someone who's exited, or perhaps like an investor or a VC. You'll actually find a lot of people are very receptive no matter where they're at in their own journey. Everyone in this industry wants to help someone else, I would say, or majority of people. And at the end of every conversation, what I like to do when I'm introduced to someone is ask them to introduce me to someone else. Because once you have a warm introduction, they're more likely to want to meet you. And that's what's really helped build my personal network from an investment perspective, and also just an advisor perspective, is when we have a conversation, I might say, okay, Candace, who do you know that would be interested in what we're building or could help me answer questions on the technical side or global expansion side? And they will always have someone to ask for you and to give you as advice. So that's the biggest thing, networking, and then ask for another network.
Yeah, I learned. Next time I will definitely ask every single people that I met in the networking. I will ask them to some certain questions.
Everyone likes to help, so if you often get more than that. They might give you like 3 different names, and then all of a sudden your inbox is full and you're like, okay, I've got to have all these meetings. But most people that I've met have been so helpful and so incredibly supportive about what we're building, and then also you as a founder as well, not just a company.
Yeah, I love our conversation. It's really inspiring. I feel like I've chat with a really wise friend, which is our aiming for. Yeah, thank you so much, Lauren, for today's podcast.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
If you find it's useful, if you find you need to rethink about your own routines, please share it with a friend as a morning boost, and subscribe, leave a review. That could help us a lot, and we will see you in the next one.